Mr. Johnson's French, a perfect fit for the entertainment.
As I passed by Evelyn, she whispered it just loud enough for us to hear, a smug look on her face. That mocking sneer, so unfit for a bride on her wedding day. The speech I prepared for Scott's surprise was actually a trap set by Evelyn to humiliate us, my husband and me. Evelyn had always looked down on us for being dropouts, hurling insults at every opportunity. With her Harvard degree, she often belittled us with her favorite phrase, just dropouts. Her insistence that we participate in the wedding if we wanted to attend was probably a scheme to make us the laughingstock in front of her family. Dropouts giving a speech in French? Impossible, she must have thought. Evelyn probably expected a pitiful, broken French-speaking old man trying to show off. "We'll be fine. Don't worry about us. Just look forward to it," we reassured Scott, who looked anxious, determined to put Evelyn's arrogance in check. I grasped the microphone firmly. "I'm Violet, turning 70 this year. Though we faced some hardships in our youth, we now live an ordinary life as a regular family. We've always cherished Scott, our eldest son, sparing him the struggles we endured. Our efforts paid off when he met a woman and decided to marry. Sadly, this wedding made us face hardships once again. The first time we met Evelyn, our future daughter-in-law, was when they visited us for a family meeting. Initially, Evelyn seemed modest and gentle, so we were happy that such a wonderful person would become Scott's wife.
We were thinking of just submitting the marriage papers and skipping the ceremony."
"What a waste! Let's celebrate it properly."
"Yeah, we can contribute financially, so have a nice ceremony."
Our discussion about the wedding was cordial throughout. It changed when Taylor, my husband, started talking about Scott's past. "We're glad he was born smart, unlike us. He even went to a national university."
"Evelyn, didn't Taylor graduate from a public university?"
"No, we didn't go to high school."
"What? So, are you both dropouts?"
Evelyn asked, looking surprised. We had to help with the family business instead of going to school. Though not something to be proud of, we just smiled wryly at her reaction. We had always wished to study like everyone else, but we were proud of our family and didn't resent our circumstances. It's quite shocking to hear dropouts, isn't it?
Yes, it's a relief Scott didn't inherit the lack of intelligence.
What do you mean?
Having dropouts as in-laws, it's making a silk purse out of a sow's ear,
she said with a smile. The room went silent in an instant. While it wasn't something to brag about, her blatant disrespect made Taylor and me exchange looks of disbelief. We were shocked by her cruel words, but she seemed unbothered, even asking playfully,
"Oh, was that too difficult for dropouts?"
Her carefree smile left us speechless. We swallowed our words, choosing to believe she meant no harm. However, Evelyn's behavior was nothing but malicious, looking down on us as pitiable, uneducated in-laws. It must have been because of the word dropout that they thought we were pathetic in-laws with no education. Ever since then, she started hurling insults at us every opportunity, with an attitude you'd never imagine from the first impression.
"You two got married quite young, didn't you? Was that because there was nothing else to do?"
"That's not true. We really got to know each other and then decided to marry."
"A time when free love was possible, huh? But still, ending up marrying a dropout, it means you could only find someone on the same level, right?"
Evelyn, while smiling and lifting the corners of her mouth, had malice in every word she uttered. Despite the terrible things she said, neither Taylor nor I could get through to her. She wouldn't listen, always retorting with,
"What do you know? You didn't even finish school."
In front of Scott, she seemed to wear a mask, but when he wasn't around, she'd come over and say whatever she pleased. Indeed, Evelyn is a brilliant Harvard graduate, but her arrogance was a stark reminder that education and character don't necessarily go hand in hand. Even as the wedding preparations progressed, Evelyn's attitude only worsened. When she came over, she'd look at the meal I prepared and say mockingly,
"A dropout can cook, huh?"
Another time she said,
"Living in such a nice house as a dropout. I guess it's because of Scott, huh?"
She even said something like he was indebted to Scott.
"Don't be rude to Dad, Evelyn. This house was bought with Dad's earning." "Scott is so kind. He must have helped a lot, right?"
Scott tried to correct her, but she just looked at us smugly, saying,
"I didn't mean any harm."
Her disdainful gaze seemed filled with malice, and she acted as if my speaking up was simply me being a nuisance.
"There's no way a dropout could earn enough to build a house. That's what my friends say too."
To top it off, Evelyn spread baseless rumors about us relying on Scott's income and living a lavish life, which was disheartening.
"Don't think just because I married Scott that I'll take care of you. I'm part of his family, not a burden like you."
That's a relief. We wouldn't want someone who can speak so cruelly to take care of us.
No use pretending, you know. Oh, and don't bother us anymore, thinking you're still connected to Scott.
Despite our protests, Evelyn seemed convinced we were still relying on Scott and kept making snide remarks. Frustrated, I could only sigh. In the midst of all this, Evelyn made an unexpected request. She wanted us to give a speech at the wedding as a sort of a performance.
"You've contributed to the wedding costs, so I'll let you attend. In return, can I ask a favor? And it's a surprise for Scott, so keep it a secret."
Such short notice is troublesome.
"I'm sorry for the oversight, but it's already scheduled, so we can't change it."
A speech, huh? Well, I guess that's okay. Despite my misgivings about her intentions, I resignedly agreed. We consented to her request for a 10-minute speech, though we suspected something. Surely she wouldn't harass us during a speech, but as soon as I agreed, Evelyn narrowed her eyes, smiled wickedly, and said,
"Great! Then please give your speech in French tomorrow."
"French? Why on earth?" Surprised, I asked her, and she looked down at me triumphantly. Her expression confirmed that Evelyn held nothing but malice towards us.
"Like me, my friends are all Harvard elites. I don't want to be looked down upon because my in-laws are dropouts."
But just because they're elites doesn't mean it has to be in French, right? What about the other guests?
"Ah, right. French must be too much for a pair of dropouts like you. Making excuses? How embarrassing."
Evelyn, with her continuous sarcasm, forced us into a corner and left after saying,
"If you're attending, you'd better keep your promise."
I glanced at Taylor with a troubled look, but he just shook his head silently. As I was pondering what to do, Scott called.
"Mom, are you okay? Everything all right?"
"Yes, I'm fine. Why do you ask?"
"I heard from Evelyn that you guys were going to liven up the wedding, so I thought maybe she went to bother you again."
Scott sounded apologetic. It seemed he called because he was worried about us due to Evelyn's excessive behavior.
"I wonder if choosing Evelyn as a partner was a mistake. I never thought someone could change so much just because of their education."
Scott muttered this quietly, sounding defeated. I couldn't let our proud son, who never discriminated based on education and grew up kind, worry anymore. Taylor and I exchanged glances and nodded. "We're fine, don't worry about us. We're looking forward to the wedding." After reassuring Scott, we started preparing our speech. Determined to give Evelyn a taste of her own medicine, we headed to the wedding venue the next day. The wedding day itself seemed to go smoothly, except for Evelyn's friends who sneered at us from their seats. Even in the hallway, someone deliberately bumped into me without apologizing, likely influenced by something Evelyn said. I'm sure Evelyn was asking something about us, as she didn't even apologize and looked at us with a mocking smile on her face as she left.
"You okay, Violet?"
"Yes, I'm fine." I could guess what they'd been told, but it was shocking that people could behave so rudely to someone they just met. Their character itself was questionable. If I had a silk purse out of a sow's ear, they must be birds of a feather. Sighing, I composed myself. I didn't retort to them, waiting for the right moment to strike back.
Now, let's have a surprise speech from the groom's parents.
The announcer's cheerful voice prompted us to look up. Scott looked at us in surprise. Beside him, Evelyn, looking very unbride-like, sneered at us.
A speech in French by dropout elders, perfect for entertainment.
As we passed Evelyn, she whispered this so only we could hear, smirking triumphantly. I wanted to slap that smug look off her face, but held back and took the microphone from the announcer. I took a deep breath before beginning my speech. First, let me tell you a bit about us. The moment I started, Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise at the edge of my vision. She must have been looking forward to a poor speech in broken French from an elderly dropout, while I may not have been as fluent as a native speaker. It was enough to disappoint her. Taylor even surprised everyone by speaking not only French but also Japanese and Chinese. Seeing Evelyn's shocked face, I smiled mischievously.
Why can you give such a speech? It's strange for dropouts.
Don't assume education sums up everything about a person, I replied quietly, then continued my speech. I revealed in French how Evelyn disliked our educational background, how she suddenly asked us to speak French the day before, how demanding she was, saying we should do it since we were attending the wedding. I aired all her insults in French. I wanted to say more, but Evelyn, who lost her composure, interrupted the speech, ending it abruptly. Still, her bizarre behavior caused a stir among the guests, and seeing Evelyn's defeated face felt like sufficient revenge.
Sorry for the trouble, but that was a surprise speech from the groom's parents. Thank you.
No, thank you.
That was impressive pronunciation. Did you study abroad?
No, I'm embarrassed to say I only went to school up to junior high. While it's true that I dropped out, it was to help with the family business. Taylor also dropped out, but like me, he helped his family and not only turned their company around, but grew it significantly. He's now the CEO. Taylor worked hard and climbed up from nothing, even starting his own company. He had the talent to acquire necessary knowledge through self-study, so not being able to attend school was a minor issue for him. Taylor and I met through work. Realizing we had similar backgrounds, he helped with my family's business, a great benefactor. I really appreciate you helping my family. I don't know how to thank you enough. If you want to thank me, work with me. Having someone who shares the same struggles is reassuring. So I married Taylor and worked in his company until I retired. Since his company also did international business, Taylor and I could speak French fluently. I turned to Evelyn with a smile and said, "The one who asked us to give a speech in French at this wonderful place was the bride. She arranged this to ensure that we, as dropouts, wouldn't be ridiculed by her and her high-educated friends from Harvard." Evelyn, who had requested the speech in French, seemed unable to understand it well and looked troubled. She probably didn't understand the content of our earlier speech. Her earlier outburst was likely due to her dislike of us speaking French fluently, her usual habit. I waved with a smile, and to my surprise, Evelyn waved back, her usual sarcasm gone as she remained silent, looking down. Evelyn's guests, unlike her, seemed to have understood the speech well, their smiles quickly fading. Even her parents looked the same. The celebratory mood changed, and Evelyn, looking terrified, was glared at by relatives, appearing uncomfortable. Like a lion in a den, her plans to mock us backfired and everything went awry. My husband and I exchanged smiles, not expecting our speech to have such an effect. Scott, sitting beside a pale-faced Evelyn, caught our eye and smiled, giving a thumbs up. Afterward, as expected, Evelyn faced severe criticism from her relatives, especially her parents who had business dealings with Taylor's company. came to us after the ceremony, bowing their heads and informing us. We tried to calm them as they stopped us on our way out, forcing Evelyn, still in her beautiful dress, to bow and apologize.
Our daughter was terribly rude. We're so sorry.
It's okay. Even if they're family, they're separate individuals.
I didn't know about this. It wasn't supposed to be like this.
Well, of course you never listened to me. You were so happy making a silk purse out of a sow's ear. When I revealed this in front of her parents, they both turned red and glared at Evelyn. Evelyn's face grew even paler.
We will make sure she reflects thoroughly at home. We'll re-educate her to ensure this never happens again.
It's okay, she became a part of our son's family, not ours. We were already considered severed ties. Evelyn, at these final words, had tears in her eyes. Her parents seemed quite intimidating, but that was not our concern. Moreover, her friends who believed baseless rumors about us being terrible dropouts also cut ties, embarrassed by their own misconceptions.
Why do I have to suffer like this? If Scott had told me, this wouldn't have happened.
I did tell you. I had enough earnings to build a house and didn't need any help. In fact, they even paid for all my tuition.
I never heard that.
Well, you never listened to anything I said.
With that cold response, Scott turned his back on Evelyn. Even the usually gentle Scott had reached his limit and was considering divorce despite the recent wedding. Abandoned by relatives, friends, and Scott, Evelyn stood alone and desolate at the wedding venue. A few days after the wedding, Scott, still contemplating divorce, hoped Evelyn would sincerely reflect, so their marriage continued for now. Abandoned by Scott, Evelyn, as if transformed, was working diligently.
Violet, can you please forgive the past and be friends again?
Friends again? I don't think we ever were. In front of Scott, she seemed remorseful, but towards us, she often tried to cozy up, apologizing. Unfortunately, I'm not the one to easily forget. I pretended not to notice her intentions to reconcile with Scott and his parents, and ignored her. Who was it that said to consider our ties severed?
Stop it, will you? Stop pretending to be senile and just help me, okay? Holding a grudge forever. How mean can you get?
Yes, you're right. Just like you trying to enjoy the French of dropout elders for entertainment. Frustrated by my retort, Evelyn glared at me. Her unrepentant attitude might truly sever our ties. Where does such pride come from in someone who looks down on others and refuses to repent? Recently, a relative who had recorded the wedding sent us the footage. We burst out laughing watching the bride's shocked face during my speech. School isn't the only place to learn. Maybe I'll start learning something new too.
Why not? I might join you in that.
We decided to go to a bookstore together to look for study materials.
Because I got my employee pregnant, I'm divorcing you. She'll be my wife. Without any sign of remorse, Henry presented me with divorce papers right in front of me. Are you serious? She's just 23, right? Maybe I had developed a bit of affection for Henry after being together for 30 years. But Henry easily trampled over my feelings. Are you kidding me? Unlike you, a stay-at-home wife, I'm the president of a company. His usual attitude made me feel like any love I had for Henry was completely drying up. And then, a dark emotion began to coil within my now empty heart. Yeah, got it. And so, a period was put to our 30 years of marriage. Henry really didn't understand anything, acting without thinking about the future. I signed the divorce papers, thinking he would regret something that happens later, but it's not my concern. And then, 2 weeks after the divorce, I kept quiet, but she... Excuse me? Henry, who had a lavish wedding ceremony abroad, was about to discover a terrible truth. My name is Sally. I am the same age as my husband Henry, 56 years old, and he is a company president. Henry and I met at a mixer. I'm from a small town where all my classmates already had families or had given birth to children. I wasn't particularly in a rush, but I admired the idea of family, watching my close friends' families. I was raised by my grandparents after my parents passed away when I was young. To be honest, I wasn't very close to my grandparents. Probably because my father had eloped with their only daughter, my mother. So, I always dreamed of building a bright and happy family of my own. That dream led me to meet Henry at a mixer. I was raised in a single-parent home too, so I can somewhat understand how you feel, Sally. By the way, I'm planning to start a company and would love for you to join me. Would you date me? I think we could make it work, with someone as intelligent and goal-oriented as you. I was drawn to Henry's straightforward words and agreed to date him. That was when my fate's gears started to slip, I believe. We dated with the intention to marry and did so successfully when we both were 26. 30 years have passed since then, living our life together. We didn't have children. Because we couldn't conceive. We married at a good age, so we started trying for a baby when we reached 30. But it didn't go well. Henry seemed to think that infertility was always the woman's fault. For the first half year, it felt like, this is just how it is, but as 1 year, then 2, passed, Henry's attitude worsened. You must have some problem if you can't get pregnant. Go get checked out. I know a doctor. I wasn't keen on the idea. Henry made it sound simple, but it is a very delicate field. It felt odd going to someone known by my husband. I had my own doctor, so I said I would go there, and Henry frowned and started complaining. So you're saying my friend isn't trustworthy? That's not what I'm saying. It's just that my doctor knows my medical history better. Fine, do whatever you want. But don't expect me to deal with any consequences. Henry stormed off in a rage. Despite upsetting him, I strongly preferred to choose my own doctor and went as planned. The result was that I had no issues. The doctor said we wouldn't know if it was infertility without testing Henry too. But bringing that up only made him angrier. There's no way I'm infertile. What nonsense is that doctor spouting? This is why it's all messed up. If you had gone to my acquaintance from the start, this wouldn't have happened. But it's too late now. I blame you for our infertility issues. Fix it yourself. Our attempts at having a baby never found a resolution, dragging on past our 40s. I wanted to have a child if possible, but it seemed Henry didn't feel the same. He thought it was embarrassing to try for a baby past 40, and from that point, we lived together as if we were strangers. Still, as a business owner, Henry needed a successor. So, we decided to adopt an orphan child as our own. Our son's name is Kyle. He's grown into a sincere and kind-hearted adult. Kyle is now 21 years old. He's attending college while receiving training as Henry's company successor. I've turned 56, and it's time to start seriously thinking about retirement, when an unbelievable incident occurred. Nice to meet you, I'm Camila. I'm always being taken care of by the president. She greeted me in a drawn-out manner, a new employee at Henry's company. Her arrival added yet another worry to my life. My first impression of Camila was that she seemed like a beauty who would fit right into the glamorous world. She had sharp facial features, a good figure, and appeared to be around 5 feet 5 inches. She used to model while she was in college. Though she's not modeling now that she's joined Henry's company as a new employee, she still exudes an undeniable aura. The reason she came to greet me was that she moved into the house next door. Actually, the apartment next to ours is entirely rented out as company housing, primarily for single employees. Camila, living alone, found it cheaper than renting a regular apartment, so she opted for company housing. It's common knowledge that the company president's house is right next to the company housing. At first, I thought Camila had just come over to say hello. But then she made a statement I could have never anticipated. Just between us, I think the president has taken quite a liking to me. He even complimented my looks during the interview, and I come from a pretty good university. Oh, were you just a high school grad? Oops, sorry about that. Her clearly condescending remark made me tremble with anger. I've always believed that education is just a part of one's background. Without results, it doesn't mean much. That's how I see it. Sparks flew between Camila and me. I've always been competitive, and if someone says something unpleasant to me, I can't help but respond. I was often teased by my classmates for being raised by my grandparents when I was in elementary school. So, I decided I didn't want to carry that resentment forever and made it a point to clearly express my dislike for anything unpleasant. Camila seemed taken aback by my response, not expecting me to retaliate. But then, unexpectedly, reinforcements arrived. "Hi, Camila. How's work? Getting the hang of it?" It was Henry. Of course, he wasn't on my side but rather supported Camila, whom he doted on. "Sally, stop being so childish. Isn't it embarrassing for the wife of the president? This is why I don't want to introduce you in front of everyone. Don't do anything more to tarnish my reputation, okay?" "Fine, I got it." Henry was always like this. He always put me down, never once taking my side. The reason I still live with him is because of Kyle. Kyle is still in his second year of university and needs to attend for about another year. But once Kyle enters the workforce, I won't have any obligations to Henry, and it might be time to end our relationship. So, I just need to endure for less than 2 more years. That's why I continued to live in what seemed like a marriage of convenience with Henry. However, the arrival of this new employee, Camila, would unexpectedly throw my plans off course. Less than a year after Camila moved into the company housing, I discovered something serious. "Henry, do you like Camila that much?" "Of course. A young girl like her is cuter and more likable than some old lady." Henry had said he couldn't come home that day due to an important business deal. So, I decided to dine out alone. It's been a while since I was alone, so I thought I'd have a drink. While walking through downtown, I witnessed Henry and Camila walking arm in arm. And I was speechless when I saw the building they entered. Henry was definitely having an affair with Camila. From that moment, I started making moves in secret, careful not to let Henry or anyone else catch on. Months passed, and one day, Henry said with a creepy smile, "Because I got my employee pregnant, I'm divorcing you. She'll be the president's wife." It was clear he was talking about Camila. I glared at Henry in silence. Then, without any hint of guilt, he thrust the divorce papers in front of me. "Are you serious? She's only 23, isn't she? And for a new employee to get pregnant with the boss's child, that's unheard of. Whether she becomes the wife of the company president or not, that's irrelevant. Do you seriously think you can take responsibility for her life?" After 30 years together, I had developed some feelings for Henry. I tried to warn him with that sentiment, but Henry was not thinking at all and instead complained to me. "Are you joking? I'm the president of a company. As long as I'm here, Camila won't be threatened, and I can support her. You, a non-productive housewife, should worry about being divorced and left by your husband." Feeling his usual attitude, I could sense any love I had for Henry drying up completely. And then, dark emotions began to coil inside my emptied heart. "Yeah, okay. If you say so, I won't stop you. Just make sure you have no regrets." I meant it as a final piece of advice, but it didn't resonate with Henry at all. Regrets? Why would I? Unlike you, a housewife without a proper career, I've been successful from the start. Now, you'll live as a lonely woman divorced at 56. And so, a period was put to our 30 years of marriage. Henry, having received the divorce papers I signed, proceeded with the divorce. After finalizing the divorce, he got married to Camila. But that aside, it seemed my divorce from him was a foregone conclusion, and they were off abroad immediately after their marriage. The purpose was their wedding. Perhaps unable to invite employees to a wedding that stemmed from an affair, they held a modest yet grand ceremony. I wonder how much they spent. After their wedding ceremony abroad, they enjoyed their honeymoon and returned home in about 2 weeks. After the divorce, Henry moved out, perhaps buying a condo somewhere to live with Camila. However, realizing he had forgotten something, he returned, and I greeted him with a thin smile, asking, "Have you been checking your credit card statements properly?" Taken aback by my sudden question, Henry's face showed utter displeasure. But his expression fell on my next words. "I've kept quiet, but she..." "What?" "Seems she's hooked on a guy." "What?" "No, what are you suddenly talking about? That's impossible, she's a pure maiden." Seeing Henry say that sent a chill down my spine. Regardless of what anyone says, the fact that Camila was spending on nightclubs remains unchanged. Facing a disbelieving Henry, I placed a photo in front of him. To my surprise, Henry let out a silent scream. Thought cheating and divorcing was the end of it? Thought a housewife like me wouldn't do anything due to lack of knowledge? Unfortunately, I've been preparing to make you two pay for a long time. I've meticulously prepared such photos. Henry, with trembling hands, managed to pick up the photo and scrutinized it. "This blonde man is the guy?" "Yeah. Supposedly from one of the nightclubs downtown. Camila seems to have enough money to afford playing like this. Judging by the empty bottles around, it looks like she's spent well over $20,000. $20,000? There's no way Camila has that kind of money." Echoing my words, Henry clutched his head. Then, as if snapping back to reality, he began checking his credit card statements. His face turning increasingly pale. As I suspected, Camila had been using Henry's credit card to lavish money. For her, it's like having an ATM that doesn't use her own money, but showers her with attention. Indeed, Henry had been completely deceived by her. Realizing this, he looked up at me and said, "Can I report this as unauthorized use to the credit card company?" "That's impossible. She's not underage, a full 23 years old, and was your spouse. It's not like she stole the card, you allowed her to use it freely, right?" With that, Henry, with a pained expression, continued, "I gave it to her for living expenses, thinking she'd spend a few thousand, maybe $20,000 at most. But to spend it on a nightclub? Unbelievable, what's happening?" He lamented, but it was his own doing. Not seeing her true nature and giving her a credit card with a limit over $20,000 was my mistake. I could only respond with a wry smile to such a ridiculous event. A few hours later, I got a call from Camila. "Hey, is it true you've been snooping around behind my back?" When I got home, Henry showed me the photos and scolded me. Unbelievable. Really, can you stop doing this because of your ugly jealousy? The photos I showed Henry seemed to have been taken home by him and used to confront Camila. She must have been scolded severely, as her usual act was nowhere to be seen. I almost laughed. Both Henry and Camila were at fault. Because you cheated and stole my husband, doing this much is only fair, right? You might escape blame without concrete evidence of your affair, which is why I asked a detective to leave no stone unturned for indisputable evidence, be it photos or recordings. I replied calmly. Camila seemed to be grinding her teeth on the other end of the phone. After a few seconds of silence, she snorted and said, "Fine, whatever. This is defamation against me, and I'll sue you for it." Excuse me? I couldn't help but let out a disbelieving sigh. Did she truly understand the meaning of defamation when she said that? After all, it was their affair that ended our 30-year marriage. If anyone should be suing, it should be me, the victim. But Camila's misguided statements didn't stop. I have the ultimate ATM in Henry. Just a few tears, and he's back on my side, and you'll be nothing but a distant memory. Just wait and see how long you last until it's your turn to cry. The call abruptly ended. Naturally, Camila was the one who ended up crying. A few days after I exposed her true nature to Henry, she came to my house, begging on her knees. "Could you please talk to Henry? Suing a 23-year-old for marriage fraud seems a bit much, don't you think?" As expected, I couldn't help but laugh. Camila's brows furrowed for a moment, but it was clear she knew she was in no position to argue. Henry is the president. But he's had dealings with lawyers due to his long tenure at the top of his company. That's probably why he asked if it was possible to sue for marriage fraud. Camila clearly saw Henry as nothing more than an ATM, devoid of any real affection. And regarding the pregnancy, if by any chance it wasn't Henry's child, the outcome was as clear as day. Despite her bluster, faced with the prospect of being sued, she was powerless. That's why she came to me for help. Ironically, the only one who could stop Henry now. Unfortunately, I'm human too, and I have feelings about the way you've treated me. Paying money isn't going to just make everything okay. You knew he was married and still chose to have an affair and get pregnant. Can you even comprehend the mental anguish that caused me? Without a hint of a smile and speaking rapidly, I made my stance clear, and Camila shrank back. She had no response. I made it clear I had no intention of forgiving either Camila or Henry. It was time to settle things once and for all. If Camila had shown any sign of remorse, I might have considered her condition before acting, but that seemed unnecessary now. I had made up my mind. Let's handle the rest through lawyers, shall we? I have no intention of dragging this out any longer. Be prepared. With a stern look, Camila let out a small scream and fled. If she was going to run away at the slightest confrontation, she shouldn't have started any of this in the first place. But once things had escalated to this point, there was no turning back. A few days later, Henry came to my house. He approached me with a plastered-on smile, begging for reconciliation. The audacity was astounding. I cut him off. Now you want to start over? What kind of nerve do you have? And I asked you, didn't I? If you could take responsibility for her life after getting a 23-year-old pregnant. Well, that. I never thought she could be such a schemer. Using my card to splurge on nightclubs and buy luxury goods at will. Thanks to her, my savings dropped by about $100,000. Hearing this was music to my ears. Grinning, I said, "That was our joint savings, right? Just so you know, we need to split the amount at the time of our divorce. If I remember correctly, we had about $400,000 saved up as a couple, right? I'll be taking $200,000 as part of the property division. Unfortunately, your share of $200,000 has been spent by Camila, leaving you with just $100,000. Henry started to get angry. He argued that it was force majeure that Camila spent the money, so we should split the remaining $300,000, which was an utterly selfish argument to me. Considering he was the one who cheated, he had no right to dictate terms, especially since his affair partner had squandered our savings on nightclubs and other frivolities. I also reminded him of something critical he seemed to have forgotten. I checked with the lawyer, and dividing the $400,000 at the time of our divorce is a done deal. Moreover, Henry, you need to be prepared to step down from the top of the company." "What? No, the divorce and the company are unrelated, right? The company is mine, I built it. As for the property division..." As he was speaking, the door to the living room opened, and there stood Kyle. "Dad, I'm disappointed in you. Resorting to using company funds because you don't want to pay out of your own pocket for Camila's extravagant spending." At that moment, Henry's demeanor completely changed. He must have thought he could bluff his way through with me. But Kyle's arrival and his statement put Henry in a tight spot. As Kyle said, Henry had been dipping into company funds. Not just a few $100,000 but over $200,000. "You know, I've been studying economics and business management at university while working in the company's accounting department, right? I noticed something was off and conducted an internal investigation, which revealed you've been funneling company money into your personal accounts." Kyle said this while presenting irrefutable evidence. Realizing he couldn't talk his way out of it, Henry, like Camila, began to grovel for forgiveness. "I was wrong, I admit it. So, Kyle, can you look the other way? I'm your father, after all. Sally, we've been married for 30 years, be a little kinder to me. Please." Such a shallow apology was worthless. Kyle and I remained unmoved. The decision to remove him from his position had already been agreed upon among the board members. By the time he realized it, it was too late, and all Henry could do was cry and apologize profusely. Then, unexpectedly, Camila burst in. "I knew you'd be here. Since the thing came out, you haven't come back to the apartment, and you've been avoiding me at the company. Fine, I'll divorce Henry. The child is definitely yours, so I'll be expecting child support." Camila, red-faced with anger, was not rebuked by me or Henry, but by Kyle. "Do you know why I became my parents' adopted child, Camila?" "Huh? Because this woman was infertile." "My mother wasn't infertile. The infertile one was my father." The atmosphere froze at that moment. After starting infertility treatment, I received no cooperation from Henry. Perhaps he might be infertile, but without his cooperation for testing, there was nothing I could do. I had given up at that time, but now, I couldn't shake off my suspicion. When Camila got pregnant, I was in my early 30s, not much older than her current age of 23. The difference in pregnancy rates isn't significant until about 35. So, when I heard Camila was pregnant, I decided to visit a certain person. The Dr. Henry initially recommended it to me. I was really conflicted about visiting, but I thought maybe he knew something and clung to that hope. That's where I learned the truth. The infertile one wasn't me, but Henry. Apparently, Henry had a test done at the insistence of an ex-girlfriend before we dated. Knowing Henry's pride and their acquaintance, the doctor didn't tell him the truth and said there were no issues. When I went to visit the doctor, Kyle, concerned about me, insisted on accompanying me. I never imagined we would uncover such a truth. It wasn't right for the doctor not to disclose the accurate test results. But blaming him now won't change anything. All that's left is the fact that you, not I, were infertile. So, I'd like to ask Camila, how did you manage to conceive Henry's child when he's incapable of impregnating anyone? Camila suddenly started to falter. If it truly was Henry's child, she could have just denied my accusation outright. Her inability to do so probably means something else. Henry, more upset about Camila's additional lies than the revelation of his infertility, started berating her fiercely. So much so that I had to intervene. "Camila, from the start, you approached Henry with the intention of using him. That's an undeniable fact. I understand why you're angry, Henry, but let's not forget you cheated on me first. That's also a fact. Shouldn't you have something to say to me before you two start your ugly quarreling?" With that, I glared, and Henry fell silent. Then, Camila started saying, "I'm sorry. I never thought it would come to this." "Oh really? You broke up a family with that mindset?" Camila could only apologize profusely, tears streaming down her face. Feeling it was unbearable to watch, I exchanged looks with Kyle and nodded, presenting them with the alimony demand papers. Henry was shocked at the amount. "Hey! This amount is outrageous! What is this?" I had demanded $200,000 from them. While it might seem shockingly high, there was a sound reason for it. Henry, despite being a CEO, hadn't provided me with any living expenses for the past 10 years. I had to use the $200,000 I inherited from my parents for our living expenses and Kyle's education costs, leaving me with no personal savings. I had to dip into my inheritance because Henry wouldn't provide living expenses, even though inheritances aren't subject to property division in a divorce. This was a clear case of duress. I researched past cases to see if anyone in a similar situation had received alimony. The amount my lawyer and I proposed was calculated based on Henry's behavior over the last 10 years, his position as a CEO, his ability to pay, and his attitude after the affair was discovered. In other words, it was justified. If they had complaints, they were welcome to take it to court, but I was determined to make him pay this amount. "You didn't provide living expenses for your housewife or pay for your child's education expenses from your own money, did you? And now, Camila, you talk about suing for defamation. You meet the criteria for alimony." Then Camila desperately pleaded. "Wait, please. I'm truly sorry now. So she was hoping for leniency or a reduction. What a complete turnaround. I was beyond anger and simply appalled. With a heavy sigh, I glared at her and said, "Now that you're desperate, you want forgiveness? A reduction? Or perhaps you're hoping to be let off the hook?" Such naive thoughts are utterly unacceptable. Eventually, Camila ran out of words and could only bite her lip and look at me. Turning slowly to Henry, he let out a small scream and then started saying something unimaginable. "I, too, was deceived by Camila, just like you, Sally. I'm a victim too. So, let's fight this together." Excuse me? I couldn't believe he chose to throw Camila under the bus, thinking reconciliation with me would lessen his burden. I was ashamed to have had such a shallow man as my husband. Both of you are pathetic. If you're going to cheat, at least take responsibility like an adult. You're not children who've just learned to speak. Kyle joined in. "This is the worst. I no longer consider you my father. My only parent is Mom. And Camila, if you came to the company just to have an affair, it's best you leave." After being told off by us, they couldn't say anything and just collapsed on the spot. Following discussions with our lawyers, we settled on $140,000 as the final amount. My lawyer initially said we could probably get $80,000 to $100,000, but I couldn't forgive Henry's actions. That's why I boldly demanded $200,000. Even if it got reduced a bit, I was betting we could still secure around $100,000. The decision to not provide me, a stay-at-home mom, with money or pay for our child's education costs, yet cheat, was deemed egregious by the court. As a result, Henry and Camila were ordered to pay $140,000. Following that, Henry was arrested for embezzling company funds, receiving a guilty verdict with probation. He avoided jail but fell into a financial abyss because of his debt. Of course, he and Camila broke up. She attempted to confront the father of her child, a guy, but with dozens of potential candidates, she ended up not pursuing it. Ultimately, the child was placed in care, which was probably better than being raised by Camila. Camila, having resigned, found a low-paying job and supplemented her income with work. Henry was ousted from his company, and with his reputation tarnished, re-employment was impossible. Now he's juggling part-time jobs. They likely had to give up the condo they lived in together and are now probably residing in a dilapidated apartment with drafts blowing through. For now, the executive vice president has stepped up as the new CEO, but he said things will change significantly when Kyle takes over. Despite the company suffering significant damage, everyone is now united in moving forward. I managed to secure money and the house in the property division, but I eventually sold the house and now live in a small apartment. It feels more peaceful this way. Kyle has graduated from college and is now respected within the company. These past 10 years, along with the divorce period, have been tumultuous because of Henry, but I'm looking forward to enjoying my retirement in peace. I'm excited to see what the future holds for Kyle, who, unlike his irresponsible father, has grown into a straightforward and honest young man.